The night before, they called me a beggar. Now, at the wedding, they ignore me, thinking I'm just some useless old man. Until the bride, in her wedding dress, stops, raises her hand in a salute and says, "Hello, General, sir." Their faces went pale. Yeah, pale, like snow on a peak in January. "Hello, folks. My name is Marcus. Thanks for tuning in, for giving me your time. It's good to have someone to talk to. I guess I just have a story that needs to be let out. A story about spending your whole life building something, a family, a home, only to wake up one day and realize you're a stranger in your own fortress. I see a lot of you joining in. If you don't mind, maybe leave a like, or a comment letting me know where you're listening from. It's good to know I'm not alone in this tonight. It all started coming apart fast after I retired. That particular day, I was driving my old Ford pickup back from a checkup at the VA hospital. I hadn't told them about this appointment. You know how it is. Men of my generation, we're taught to be self-reliant. You don't complain, you don't become a burden. I'd developed this slight tremor in my hands. The doc said it was probably stress, nothing serious, but I didn't want them to see it. I didn't want to give them any more reason to see me as less. I pulled into the driveway I'd paved myself 20 years ago and walked in the front door. The smell hit me first. Not the familiar scent of old wood and Sarah's lingering potpourri, but a sharp chemical smell of fresh paint and expensive flowery perfume. The living room, my living room, was unrecognizable. It looked like a party store had exploded. Piles of shimmering gift boxes, silk ribbons, and dozens of those fancy wedding planner boards. Eleanor, my daughter-in-law, and Liam, my son, were huddled over a laptop at the dining table. Neither of them even looked up when I came in. "Oh, you're back," Eleanor said, her eyes glued to the screen. It wasn't a question. It was just an observation, like noting the mail had arrived. "Your time's over, Dad. It's our world now. You just need to stay out of the way." Not a "how'd the doctor go?" Not a "how are you feeling?" Not even a simple glance. I was just an obstacle, a piece of furniture that had inconveniently moved. I'd become a problem to be managed in the very house I'd paid off, brick by brick. I just stood there for a second, feeling the tremor in my hand, and quickly shoved it into my pocket. I turned and walked down the hall toward my small study. My den. It was the one place that was still mine, or it was. I had what I called my wall of honor. It wasn't much, just a few things that mattered. The flag from my retirement ceremony, folded into that tight, perfect triangle, a few medals in a shadow box, and a photo of me and my unit in Kandahar, my brothers. They were all gone. The wall had been painted over, a sterile, sickly pale white, the color Eleanor called elegant. She walked past just then, swirling a glass of red wine, leaving a cloud of that perfume in her wake. "Ah, that," she said, noticing me staring at the blank space. "I had it all packed away, all those old metal bits and guns. It just looked so violent. Didn't really fit the elegant home we're trying to build here. Violent, old-fashioned, 40 years of my life, the sand, the cold, the men who didn't come home, all of it dismissed as violent, packed away in a box like some embarrassing hobby. She wasn't just clearing a wall, she was trying to erase me. She wanted me to forget who I was, and the worst part, she was teaching Liam to forget too. A few days later, she found me in the master bedroom, our bedroom, mine and Sarah's. It was on the first floor. We'd picked it years ago. It was practical, easier on my knees as I got older. "Marcus," she said, using that voice, all syrupy and false, "the wedding planner needs a proper workspace, a command center. She'll be using this room. Besides," she added, looking around in distaste, "an old man doesn't really need all this space." My chest tightened, that cold, hollow feeling. "So, where do I go?" She just pointed pointed up toward the ceiling. "I had your things moved to the attic room. It's cozy up there." Cozy. It was a storage room, hot, cramped, and smelling of dust and mothballs. And the stairs were steep. She knew I had trouble with stairs. She knew about my knees. This wasn't about convenience. It was a calculated humiliation. She was taking the very physical frailties I was trying to hide and using them as a weapon to push me out, to make me invisible. That night, I couldn't sleep. The cot they'd put up there creaked with every breath. The air was thick and still. I dragged over my old footlocker and pulled out the one photo of Sarah I'd managed to save before Eleanor's cleanup. My late wife, Sarah. God, she used to worry every time I deployed, but she was proud too. She understood what service meant. She was the one who would stay up late, polishing the brass buttons on my dress uniform before a formal event. She used to say, "Marcus, this house is your fortress. It's the place you can always come back to." Now, the fortress had been taken, and I just felt ashamed. I felt like I'd failed her. I'd let this happen. I'd let them trample on the legacy we built together. I was letting them turn me into the one thing I'd always dreaded becoming, a dependent. And as I sat there, another memory surfaced, cold and sharp. A phone call from Kandahar. Must have been 10, maybe 12 years ago. It was a rough deployment. We'd been taking contact for 3 days straight. I finally got to a satellite phone, just needed to hear a voice from home. Eleanor picked up. "Hello?" Her voice was flat. "It's me," I said. "Just calling to let you know I'm okay." There was this long, cold silence on the line, and then she said, "Good. The money's coming through fine. You don't need to come back. We're managing just fine here. Not, stay safe, not, we miss you, just the money. Even when I was half a world away, in a war zone, I wasn't a father. I wasn't a soldier. I was an ATM. The chill from that memory, it cut right through the stuffy attic air. And it brought with it a terrible, cold clarity. This wasn't new. This wasn't because I was old or retired. It had always been this way. I'd just been too busy, too deployed to see it. I sat there in the dark, on that creaking cot. Far below, on the first floor, I could hear them. Music, laughter, planning their extravagant party. With my money, with the money I'd saved my entire life. The anger, no, it wasn't just anger. It was too cold for that. It was focus. A quiet, hard resolve, like the stillness in the desert just before dawn. They thought I was finished. They thought I was just some useless, senile old man. They were wrong. I might be retired, but I was still a strategist. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to fight them on their terms. I just needed to plan. I stood up, my knees protesting, but I ignored them. I walked over to my old, battered green military chest. I ran my hand over the stenciled name, Colonel M. Reynolds. I undid the latches. The click-clack sounded impossibly loud in the silence. I lifted the lid. The smell of camphor and wool rose up to meet me, and there, inside, preserved perfectly in its garment bag, was my Army service uniform, my Class A dress blues. The rehearsal dinner was held at one of those new, flashy downtown restaurants, the kind with valet parking and wine glasses the size of your head. I knew for a fact Liam couldn't afford a place like this. I hadn't wanted to go. After the attic, after the wall, I just wanted to be left alone, but Liam had insisted. "You have to at least try to look like a supportive father," he'd said. So I went. I'd pulled out my best suit, the navy blue one I wore to church. It was clean, it was pressed, it was respectable. I came down the main stairs, taking my time, one hand on the railing. Eleanor spotted me from the entryway. She was wearing a sparkling dress that probably cost more than my first car. "Oh no," she stage whispered, loud enough for Liam and the wedding planner to hear. "You can't possibly wear that. It looks so dated." Before I could say a word, She hurried to the hall closet and pulled out an old, faded sports coat. It was a drab, brownish plaid thing, worn thin at the elbows, a button missing. It wasn't even mine. I'd never seen it before. "This is much more you," she said, holding it out. "A soldier wouldn't know anything about style anyway. This fits you perfectly." I just stood there, stunned, and then Liam, my son, he let out this sharp, barking laugh. "She's right, Dad. You look like a beggar in that thing." A beggar. The whole house went silent. The music, the chatter, everything just stopped. All of them, their rich, slick friends, they were all staring at me. Staring at me as Eleanor forced this rag, into my hands. I felt the hot blood rush to my face, the heat behind my eyes. I have commanded thousands of men. I have stood before generals and dignitaries. I have been in situations where my life was on the line. But in that moment, in my own home, holding that disgusting coat, I had never felt so small, so utterly stripped bare. This wasn't some careless joke. This was deliberate. It was a public execution of my dignity. They were putting me on display. "See, look at the useless old man we have to put up with. Look at what a burden he is." They wanted me to be ashamed of who I was. At the dinner, I just sat. I kept my hands in my lap to hide the tremor. I tried to make myself invisible, to just blend into the expensive wallpaper. I stared at my water glass, counting the seconds. But eventually, one of Liam's guests, some business partner, turned to me. He seemed polite enough. "So, Marcus, Liam tells me you're retired. What did you do before?" I cleared my throat, straightened up just a bit. "I served in the army for..." Eleanor instantly cut me off, leaning across the table and placing her manicured hand on the man's arm. "Oh, Marcus had some little government desk job," she said, her voice dripping with boredom. She then leaned in, as if sharing a secret, but loud enough for the whole table to hear. "Lots of, paper pushing, terribly boring, really. Boring. A desk job, 40 years, the nights sleeping on the ground, the friends I buried, the grit I still can't get out of my skin. All of it, all of my life, dismissed as boring. It was a direct hit, an attack on the very core of who I am, my entire legacy. I looked at Liam. I didn't say a word, but my eyes, I know my eyes were begging him. "Son, please, say something. Don't let her do this. Don't let her erase me." Our eyes met. And Liam, he just gave me this tired, annoyed little eye roll. And he turned away. He just turned back to his conversation and laughed at some other joke. That was the moment my heart truly broke. The humiliation from Eleanor was one thing. She was who she was, but the silence from Liam, that tired, dismissive glance, that was the final betrayal. I understood it then. I was completely, utterly alone. I was an outsider in my own family. The dinner dragged on. I felt numb. As people started to leave, a young woman from the other end of the table walked over. She was the bride, Ava Russo. I hadn't met her more than once or twice. She was quiet, serious, an active-duty army captain, I'd heard. She'd been silent all night, just watching. She stopped by my chair. "Sir," she said. Her voice was low, professional, just for me to hear. "I just wanted to say it's an honor to meet you." I was so startled, I just looked at her. "You know me, Captain?" She nodded. Her eyes were steady, no pity in them, just respect. "Everyone knows about Operation Desert Cyclone in Kandahar, General. You saved my friend's unit." And then, with another crisp little nod, she turned and walked away. General. I hadn't heard that word in a long time. I just sat there, the sound of it echoing in my head. General. Eleanor and Liam were by the door, soaking up the praise, too busy to notice. Ava's words were like a canteen of cold, clear water in the middle of that hot, suffocating desert of lies. She knew. In this entire room, full of phonies and liars, one person knew the truth. A soldier, someone who understood honor. Suddenly, I wasn't alone anymore. That rehearsal dinner, that beggar's coat, that was their move, their attack. But the bride had just unknowingly handed me a strategic advantage, and I knew exactly what I was going to do. The next day she came to me, up in that hot, stifling attic. This time she brought a cup of tea, an act so completely out of character, it set off every alarm bell I had. She was using the nice voice, the one that always made the hairs on my arms stand up. "Father Marcus," she said, all sweet and syrupy, "I know you've been, well, a little tired lately. And your memory." She paused, putting on this perfect mask of sympathy, tilting her head. "It's just not what it used to be. Liam and I, we're just so worried." I looked at the teacup. It was probably fine, but I didn't touch it. It was a prop, just like her concern. "I'm fine, Eleanor." She gave a little tinkling laugh. "Of course you are. Of course, but we think it's time we helped you manage things, just to take the burden off you. So you can relax. You've earned it." That's when she set a thick stack of documents on the little table next to me. It must have been 50 pages, bound in one of those blue legal covers. "It's just some routine tax paperwork," she said, waving her hand dismissively, like it was nothing. Tax paperwork. I picked it up. It was heavy. I glanced at the first page. It was dense. A wall of text full of heretofores and parties of the first part, and in witness whereof, all legal jargon designed to confuse. "Now, an old man like you doesn't need to bother his head trying to understand all that," she said, sliding a sleek, expensive-looking pen out of her pocket and clicking it. She pushed it toward me. "You just need to sign here, here," she flipped a few pages, "and here. We'll take care of the rest." She pointed to 3 bright yellow "Sign Here" tabs. I looked up from the papers and just looked at her. Her eyes weren't smiling. They were cold, sharp, watching me. This wasn't help. This was an ambush. You know, all my life I've prided myself on taking care of my own business, paying my own bills, reading the fine print, that core value, that need to maintain my own independence. It was screaming inside me. I pushed the papers back, ever so slightly. "I think I'll read them over first," I said. My voice was calmer than I felt. "Read them?" She actually laughed out loud, a sharp, ugly sound, not at all like her fake sweet voice. "Marcus, you can't even remember where you left your glasses half the time. Just sign the papers so we can get on with this." But I just shook my head. "I'll read them," I repeated. The mask fell. Her face tightened with pure, undiluted anger. She snatched her pen back. "Fine. Waste your time, you stubborn old fool," she hissed, and stormed out of the room, slamming the attic door behind her. The whole frame rattled. The second that door clicked shut, I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking again. That damn tremor, but I managed. I don't have a lot of numbers in my contacts, but I have the ones that matter. I called Mike Singh. Mike and I, we go way back. Retired DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, one of the sharpest men I've ever known. We'd been in some tight spots together, the kind where you learn, real fast, who you can trust with your life. "Mike," I said, my voice low, "I'm in a situation here. I need a set of eyes on some documents. Something doesn't feel right." "Send them over," he said. No small talk. That's Mike. I took pictures of the signature pages, the cover sheet, and a few of the more complex-looking paragraphs and sent them to him. He called back in less than 10 minutes. "Marcus," he said, and his voice was grim, "where did you get these?" "My daughter-in-law. She said they're tax papers." I heard him let out a long, slow breath. "Mike, what is it?" "They're not tax papers, Marcus. That first section you sent? That's a full, durable power of attorney. It gives her complete control over your finances, your bank accounts, your medical decisions, everything. And the second part? That's a quitclaim deed." It signs your house over to them, lock, stock, and barrel, for the sum of $1. He paused. Marcus, I need you to listen to me. If you sign this, you lose everything. You'll be a guest in your own home, and they can kick you out the next day. I felt the air go out of my lungs. That hot, stuffy attic room suddenly felt ice cold. Lose everything. The house Sarah and I built, my independence, my last shred of dignity. Why, Mike? Why are they doing this? They're desperate, Mike said. That's what this smells like. Give me an hour. It wasn't even an hour. 45 minutes later, an email landed on my phone. Mike was retired, but he still had his skills. He'd done a deep dive. It was a financial report. Liam and Eleanor. Credit card debt stacked so high I couldn't even believe the number. Maxed out. All of them. And gambling debts. Online sports betting. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. Liam, my son, he'd burned through everything. His inheritance from Sarah. His own salary. Everything. They weren't just greedy. They were drowning. And they were trying to pull me under with them. That entitlement, that feeling that my assets, my home, were theirs. It all made a terrible, sick kind of sense now. I was still trying to catch my breath, staring at the numbers on my phone, when it buzzed again. An unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. General? It was Captain Russo. Ava. The bride. Her voice was urgent, quiet, like she was hiding. Sir, I apologize for this. I'm over at the house. Eleanor asked me to help with some flower arrangements, and I overheard her on the phone. She was in the garden. She didn't see me. She took a shaky breath. Sir, she was laughing. She said, and I'm quoting, as soon as the old fool signs the papers, we sell the house right after the wedding, and we are gone. Florida, maybe. He'll be the bank's problem then. She paused. Sir, they're conning you. They're planning to dump you. I closed my eyes. Mike's call was the logic, the hard data. This was the confirmation from the inside, the human intel. Thank you, Captain, I said, and my voice was perfectly steady now. You've done more than you know. Could you do me one more favor? I need a witness tomorrow. I hung up. I had the hard proof. I had the inside intel. And I had an ally on the outside. Eleanor and Liam, they thought they were cornering a sick, confused old man. They didn't realize they had just pushed a man who spent 40 years planning into doing what he does best. I called Mike back. Mike, I said, I need you to put together a presentation. Let's call it an after-action report. You know what I mean, with all that financial data. Clear, simple, undeniable. I heard him smile on the other end. Loud and clear, General. It'll be detailed. It wasn't long, maybe an hour. I was just sitting on the cot, looking at the wall, when the attic door flew open again. It banged against the wall. It was Eleanor. No tea, no fake smile, just a face like thunder. Have you signed it? I looked up at her. I'm not signing it, I said. I set the stack of papers on the little table. I know what it is, Eleanor, and I know about the debts. I know about the gambling. Her face, it was a movie, in 3 seconds. Confidence to confusion to pure raw panic. And then rage. You senile old fool, she shrieked, her voice cracking. What do you know? You know nothing. Liam, get up here, now. I heard him pounding up the steep attic stairs, taking them 2 at a time. He burst in, breathless, his face all red and sweaty. What? What's going on? Your father, Eleanor spat, pointing at me like I was a dog. He won't sign. He's babbling about debts. Liam looked at me, and I saw it. Not just anger. It was the raw, primal desperation of a cornered animal, the look of a gambler who just lost his last dollar and is ready to do anything. Dad, he said, his voice cracking. Dad, you don't understand. We need this. Just sign it, please. No, Liam. My voice was quiet, but it was hard. This is my house. This was your mother's legacy. Legacy, he laughed, a bitter, broken sound that didn't have any humor in it at all. All you ever talk about is legacy. We need the money, now. He lunged forward, not at me, but at the papers. He snatched them from the table. He shoved them and the pen right into my chest. Sign it, old man. I stood up, slowly. My knees ached, but I got to my feet. I looked him right in the eye. No. And then it happened. Liam, my son, he roared, this sound of pure frustration from the bottom of his lungs, and he put both his hands flat on my chest, and he shoved. Hard. I wasn't ready. I never could have been. I'm not the man I was. My balance is not what it used to be. I stumbled backward, a good 5 feet. My back slammed against the rough brick of the chimney that ran up through the attic. A sharp, electric pain shot up my spine. I felt the air burst out of my lungs, but that pain was nothing. Nothing. Nothing compared to the pain in my chest. Where his hands had been. The place where my heart was. My son. My own son had put his hands on me. For money. For a house. Every fear I'd ever had. About getting old. About becoming weak. About being physically dependent. It all just came true. At the hands of my own child. The door was still open. The shouting had drawn a crowd. A couple of Eleanor's wedding guests, friends of hers who must have been in the house, were standing on the landing, looking up. Their faces a mix of curiosity and concern. Eleanor saw them, and in a split second, she transformed. She burst into tears, real gushing crocodile tears. She ran to the doorway, collapsing against the frame, a hand to her forehead. "Oh my God," she sobbed. "I don't know what to do. He's having another episode. He just started yelling about the war, rambling, and he threw himself against the wall. He's so confused. He's getting violent." They looked at me, panting, clutching my back against the brick, probably pale with shock. Then they looked at her, the crying, devastated wife, and I saw their faces change. They believed her. They looked at me with pity, that awful condescending pity, the look you give a dog that's been hit by a car, or a man who's lost his mind. They saw a crazy old man, a problem to be managed. They'd taken my dignity at the dinner. They'd tried to take my house with the papers, and now they had taken my sanity. They'd made me the villain, the crazy one. Standing there in that hot, dusty room, assaulted by my own son and painted as a lunatic by his wife, it was, I think, the loneliest moment of my entire life. It felt more isolating, more abandoned than any night I ever spent on patrol in Kandahar. At least there, I had my brothers. I had men I could trust with my life, soldiers who understood what loyalty meant. It gets you thinking, doesn't it? You folks listening, you ever feel like the loyalty you can get from a good tool, like my old Craftsman hammer? I've had it for 40 years, never failed me, or that old Ford pickup out in the drive. Sometimes that loyalty feels more reliable, more real than the loyalty you get from people. Have you ever felt that? That sting of betrayal from the one person you were supposed to be able to trust, no matter what? Let me know in the comments. I'd just like to know I'm not the only one. Liam and Eleanor just stared at me. Liam was breathing hard, his eyes still wild. Eleanor had that look of sickening triumph, even through her fake tears. They thought they'd won. They thought that shove, that public performance of my confusion, they thought that was the end of it, that they had broken me. They didn't understand. They had just broken the final line, the last thread of restraint. A soldier can be wounded, he can be beaten, but he is never, ever defeated this way. When they finally left, pulling the door shut with a heavy thud, leaving me alone with the pain in my back and the ice in my chest, I didn't feel despair. I felt calm. A cold, hard, perfect calm. The battle was already over. They had just decided the terms of their own surrender. tomorrow, at the wedding. That would be Judgment Day, the morning of the wedding. I was awake before the sun. My back was a solid block of dull, throbbing pain from where I'd hit the brickwork. I could hear them downstairs. The noise started early. Music, shouting, laughter, the high-pitched, frantic sound of Eleanor giving orders to florists and caterers. They were all celebrating, putting the final touches on their victory, all built on a foundation of lies and theft. I didn't move for a long time. I just listened. Finally, I pushed myself up. I went into the small bathroom, the one with the sloped ceiling. I turned on the shower. The hot water felt good. It eased some of the stiffness in my muscles, but it couldn't wash away the grimy feeling of betrayal, the feeling of my son's hands on my chest. I dried off. I looked in the small, cracked mirror. It was time to shave. I picked up my old safety razor, lathered my face. I brought the razor to my cheek, and I noticed it, my hand. Today it wasn't shaking. Not even a little. It was perfectly, completely steady. The quiet resolve from the night before, it had settled me. It had burned away the fear, the uncertainty. When I was done, I walked over to the old green chest. I opened it. I took out the garment bag. My Class A uniform. The Army service uniform. I zipped it open. The smell of wool and polish and just a hint of camphor hit me. I ran my hand over the dark blue-green wool of the jacket. It felt solid, real. I began to dress, slowly, methodically. The white shirt, so crisp it almost cracked. The black four-in-hand tie, I cinched it tight. Then the jacket. I put it on. It felt heavy, familiar. It felt like my own skin. I took out the small box where I kept my insignia. I began to pin them on, carefully, one by one. My ribbons. Over the left pocket. Each one a story, each one a tour, each one a piece of my life. My medals, my unit citations, my combat infantryman badge. And finally, I took out the 2 silver stars, pinning them precisely on the shoulder loops. Major General, I stood in front of that cracked mirror. The man looking back at me, he wasn't the senile old fool. He wasn't the beggar in the ratty coat. He wasn't the boring desk job paper pusher. He was General Marcus Wittman. I wasn't putting on a costume. I was putting on my identity. I was putting on my honor. I didn't go down to the car with them. I heard them leave, Eleanor shouting at Liam to hurry up and stop moping. I called a taxi. I wanted to arrive on my own terms. The venue was a big, fancy country club. The kind of place with fountains out front and kids in red vests parking the cars. My taxi pulled up. I paid the driver. I didn't go in right away. I stood by the door, just out of sight, until I heard the music soften, the sign that the ceremony was about to begin. I could hear the murmur of the guests finding their seats. Then I walked in. I pulled my shoulders back, locked them. I kept my chin up. I walked straight, my back screaming with every step, but I didn't let it show. I walked right through the main doors, into the back of the grand ballroom. The music, it just sort of tripped over itself and stopped. The woman playing the organ looked up, her hands frozen on the keys. The chatter died. One by one, like a wave, heads turned. 100, maybe 200 people, all turning to look. The silence was absolute. You could feel the confusion, the shock. These people, Liam's and Eleanor's friends, they were expecting a sad, confused old man in a borrowed coat, someone to be seated in the back, out of the way. They were not expecting a general. I saw the faces of the guests from the night before, the ones who had looked at me with that awful, condescending pity. That look was gone. Now their faces were just baffled, stunned, and I saw it in the eyes of the older men in the crowd. Respect. I didn't say a single word. I didn't have to. The uniform, my uniform, it was saying everything for me. My eyes went to the front of the room, to the altar. Liam and Eleanor were standing there. Eleanor, she had a glass of champagne in her hand. She just dropped it. It shattered on the marble floor. The sound was like a gunshot in the dead silence. Her face, all that smug, bridal glow, it just vanished. It went from pink to a chalky, sickly white. She was staring at me like she'd just seen a ghost. Liam looked even worse. He looked like he'd been shoved. He just gaped, his mouth opening and closing. "Dad," he stammered, his voice cracking, loud in the quiet. "Dad, what the hell are you doing?" The bully was gone. The man who had shoved me, the man who had called me a beggar, he was gone. All that was left was a scared, panicked little boy. They realized in that 1 second they had miscalculated. They had badly, badly misjudged their opponent. I didn't answer him. I didn't even look at him. My gaze went right past him, to the bride, Captain Ava Russo. She was in her uniform too, her Army Class A's. She stood there, beautiful and strong. Our eyes met across the room. She knew. She knew exactly what this was. She gave me a single, almost imperceptible nod, a nod of confirmation. "I'm ready, sir." I nodded back. "Proceed, Captain." Eleanor was the first to recover. She was a reptile, shedding one skin for another. She forced a laugh. It was a high-pitched, terrible, brittle sound. "Oh, Father Marcus, you certainly are full of surprises," she trilled, clasping her hands together. "Look at you, how nostalgic." She was trying to spin it, to paint me as a senile old man playing dress-up, lost in his glory days. "Everyone," she said, her voice too loud, "let's raise a glass too." But no one was listening. No one was looking at her. Every eye in the room was either on me or on Ava. And then Ava moved. The bride. She stepped down from the altar. She just stepped away from Liam, leaving him standing there, frozen. Eleanor saw her. "Ava, honey, what are you? We're starting." But Ava walked right past her. She didn't even glance at her. She walked down the aisle, her back perfectly straight, her steps measured and sure. She walked right up to me, in front of everyone. The room was so quiet, I could hear the air moving through the vents. Ava stopped, 1 foot from me. She drew herself up, and she snapped to attention. She raised her hand to her brow, her fingers perfectly aligned, her elbow locked. A salute, sharp as a razor, perfect in its execution. Her voice rang out, clear and strong, not a trace of doubt in it. "Ladies and gentlemen, please excuse the interruption. I would like to honor my hero." She looked me dead in the eye. "Good morning, General, sir." General, the word just hung there. It hung in the air like a bell that had just been struck. General. Eleanor and Liam had spent weeks, months maybe, painting their picture. Confused old man, boring desk job, beggar. And in 2 words, the bride had just detonated their entire lie. Eleanor's face, she wasn't just pale, she was gasping, her mouth open, her hand at her throat. Liam looked like he was going to be sick. He was swaying on his feet. They were caught, exposed, not by me, by their own bride. Ava dropped her salute, but she didn't move. She turned, just slightly, to address the stunned crowd. "Most of you don't know this," she said, her voice commanding the room. "Liam's father, General Marcus Wittman, he's a living legend. 10 years ago in Kandahar, my unit was ambushed, pinned down. We were out of ammo, taking heavy fire, and we were about to be overrun. It was General Wittman who personally organized and led the counter-assault that saved our lives." She turned back to me, and I could see the shine of tears in her eyes, but her voice didn't waver. "I wouldn't be standing here today if it wasn't for this man. It is the single greatest honor of my life to be joining his family." She paused, and then added, clear and loud, "to be his daughter-in-law." The silence in the room didn't just break, it shattered. From the back, an old man in a suit, he started clapping. Just a slow, steady clap, then another. And then the entire room, all of them, they got to their feet, a standing ovation. The same people who, just the night before, had looked at me with pity as I stood there in that filthy coat, they were on their feet. applauding. They weren't clapping for an old man. They were clapping for a hero. I felt something in my chest, that cold, tight knot of pain and shame. It just dissolved. It was gone. And in its place, this warmth spread through me. It was recognition. It was respect. It was the feeling of your own name being given back to you. Eleanor tried to speak. "Ava, this is our wedding." But no one heard her. The sound of the applause just drowned her out. She was irrelevant. Liam, he just stood there, white as a sheet, sweat pouring down his face. He knew this wasn't the end of it. My eyes scanned the room. I looked past the clapping guests, to the far corner, to the audio tech booth that had been set up for the music and microphones. A man in a black polo shirt was sitting there, pretending to check the levels. It was Mike Singh. He looked up. Our eyes met. I gave him a short, simple nod. Ava had done her part. The field was prepped. It was time for the after-action report. The applause finally softened, turning into a room full of murmurs and whispers. People were still on their feet, but they were confused. They were looking at me, then at Ava, then at the pale, frozen faces of Liam and Eleanor. They didn't know what to make of this rupture in the perfect expensive fantasy. I looked over their heads to the back of the room, to the man in the black polo shirt at the sound booth, the man who looked like just another wedding vendor. I gave Mike Singh the nod. Just as Eleanor started to move, to try and regain control, her painted-on smile returning, the massive projector screen behind the altar flickered. The looping slideshow of their romantic photos, them laughing on a beach, them clinking champagne glasses, froze on that image. Then, it cut to black. A new image faded in. Simple, stark. White text on a simple blue background. It read, "After Action Report, Financials, Liam and Eleanor Wittman." "What is that?" Eleanor shrieked. Her voice, moments ago so sweet, was now a raw, ugly sound that echoed in the silent room. "What is that? Turn it off. Somebody turn that off." Mike, of course, had already locked the system. He'd routed the display through his own laptop. The remote in Eleanor's hand, the one for her little slideshow, was useless. She clicked it, again and again, like a drowning woman trying to fire a wet pistol. The screen changed. The first slide wasn't about them. It was about me. Mike had put up a summary of my service record. It wasn't flashy. It was just facts. Bullet points. Commissioned, United States Army, many years ago. Tours. Operation Desert Storm. Operation Enduring Freedom, 3 times. A list of my commands. Key citations. Silver Star, Purple Heart. With 2 oak leaf clusters, Legion of Merit, Bronze Star. It was just the truth. The very things Eleanor had called boring and violent and old-fashioned. The things she'd had packed away because they were an eyesore. The room was dead quiet. Just the sound of people reading. I heard a man in the front row, an older gentleman, just whisper, "My God." This wasn't bragging. It was establishing the baseline. It was the truth, standing in direct, cold opposition to the lies they had built their entire world on. It was a foundation, solid and real, against which their castle of sand was about to be measured. And then, the screen changed. Part 2. Motive. A new set of images appeared. They were bank statements, credit card statements, Liam's name, Eleanor's name. The screen was a sea of red. Visa, $28,450, past due. MasterCard, $19,800, limit reached. American Express, $32,000, account frozen. Store cards, multiple, $14,500. There was a collective gasp. These were their friends, their social circle, people they were trying to impress. And then, the one that hit the hardest. A transaction history from a half-dozen online sports betting websites. Page after page, losses, and losses, and more losses. Mike had put a total at the bottom, a number that seemed to pulse on the screen. Total debt, gambling and credit, $214,350. "They're fake," Liam shouted. He stumbled forward a step, gripping the altar. "They're lies. This is slander." But his voice was thin and trembling. He wasn't convincing anyone. He was just a drowning man. The crowd, you could feel the disgust. It was a physical thing in the air. They had all come to this lavish party, this expensive country club. All of it, every flower, every glass of champagne, was a lie. All of it funded by, well, it wasn't funded at all. It was just debt. And then, the final slide. Part 3. The proposed solution. On the screen, clear as day for everyone to see, was a scanned image of the document Eleanor had tried to force me to sign in the attic. The quitclaim deed. The durable power of attorney. Mike had used a red marker, digitally, to circle the key phrases. Hereby transfers all rights, title, and interest in the property at my home address. Grants full, unlimited, and durable power of attorney to manage all financial affairs. And next to it, an audio file icon. Mike hit play, and Ava's voice filled the room. The audio was crystal clear. It was her, repeating what she'd heard. "As soon as the old fool signs the papers, we sell the house right after the wedding, and we are gone. He'll be the bank's problem then." The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavier than any sound I have ever heard. No one moved, no one breathed. People were just staring. Some had their hands over their mouths. Eleanor was no longer pale. She was a blotchy, furious red. Her mask of civility was completely gone, burned away. She turned, her eyes landing on Ava, and she looked feral. "You!" she hissed, her voice a low snarl. "You bitch! You recorded me! You betrayed me!" Ava just stood there, poised. She didn't raise her voice. She looked at Eleanor and then at the crowd. "When I took my oath as an officer," she said, her voice steady and sure, "I swore to protect this country against all enemies, foreign and domestic." She turned back to Eleanor, and her gaze was ice. "You attacked, manipulated, and tried to steal from one of this country's finest soldiers. You preyed on the very man whose service allows you to live in freedom. I didn't betray you, Eleanor. I'm honoring my oath." Eleanor looked around, her eyes wild, searching for a friendly face, for any ally at all. She found none. She just saw a room full of people looking at her with pure, unadulterated contempt. People were physically turning their shoulders away from her. She had become toxic, right before her own eyes. I walked forward then. I stepped up onto the platform, next to Ava. I took the microphone from the stand. It felt heavy and cold in my hand. "I apologize for this interruption," I said, and my voice was steady. It didn't shake. "I didn't do this for revenge. That's not what we do. Men of my generation, soldiers, we believe in truth. We believe in accountability. We believe in honor." I looked at the crowd. My son and my daughter-in-law, they forgot those values. They forgot what it means to be part of a family, part of a community. They tried to steal my home, the home I built with my late wife. They assaulted me in that home. They called me a beggar and a fool. And they publicly slandered the legacy of my service and of Sarah's memory. I turned and I looked right at Liam. He wouldn't meet my gaze. He was just staring at the floor, a broken, hollow man of 40. "This party," I said, my voice clear in the microphone, "is over." And just like that, it was. There was no more shouting, no more drama. The crowd, they just started to leave. It wasn't a stampede, it was a quiet, embarrassed shuffle. The sound of 200 people trying to become invisible. The sound of scraping chairs, low, angry murmurs. People avoiding eye contact, with me, with each other. They were ashamed to have been a part of it, even as guests. They were fleeing the scene of a social crime. The first people to come up to me were Ava's parents. Her father, a man about my age with honest eyes, grabbed my hand with both of his. His grip was firm. "General," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "we are so terribly, terribly sorry. We had no idea. We didn't know the kind of people." "I know," I said, and I squeezed his hand back. It was a handshake of understanding, of mutual respect for the values we both held. "You have a remarkable daughter, a fine soldier. She gets it from her mother," he said, trying to smile. Ava walked over to the table where Liam was still frozen, his head in his hands. She pulled the diamond engagement ring off her finger. It was a huge, gaudy thing that I now knew was bought with debt. She didn't throw it. She just set it on the white tablecloth in front of him. It made almost no sound. "It's off," she said, her voice void of emotion. "We're done." And she turned and walked over to her parents. They stood with me for a moment, a small, quiet island of honor in the wreckage. In less than 10 minutes, the entire grand ballroom was empty. All that was left was the debris, the half-eaten food, the spilled champagne soaking into the linens, the flowers already starting to wilt. It was just me, Ava, her family, Mike, and them. Liam was still sitting, just collapsed, a puppet with its strings cut. Eleanor was pacing back and forth, like a caged animal, muttering to herself, her expensive dress dragging through a puddle of champagne. Then she stopped and whirled on Liam. "This is all your fault," she screeched, her voice echoing in the empty hall. "You useless, spineless child! You couldn't even handle one old man. You've ruined everything. My life." Liam slowly lifted his head. He looked over at me. His eyes were empty. Dead. There was nothing there. No anger, no sadness, just a void. "Dad," he whispered. "Dad, Don't," I said, cutting him off. My voice wasn't angry. It was just tired. Bone tired. "Don't. Not now, Liam. We have a lot to talk about. But not here. Not tonight." Seeing him like that, it didn't bring me joy. It was just a profound, heavy sadness. This was my son, my boy, and this is what he had become. Mike came up and put a hand on my shoulder. "Good work, General. Let's get you out of here. What's next?" I looked at the mess, at the ruins of their lie. "Now," I said, "we go home. My home." I rode back with Mike. We didn't talk much. We just listened to the hum of the engine. The first thing I did when I got to the house, I didn't even go inside. I sat on the porch and I called a 24-hour locksmith. An hour later, a young man in a van pulled up. He was all business. A working man. I appreciated that. I watched him work, his tools quick and precise. The sound of the drill, the snick of the metal tumblers. He removed the old cylinders and installed new ones. When he was done, he handed me a set of 2 new keys, bright and shiny. I took them. They felt heavy in my hand, heavier than they should have. It wasn't just brass. It was control. It was safety. It was independence. It was my house. I paid the man, tipped him well, and he drove off. I stood on my own porch. I put the new key in the new lock. It turned smoothly. The click of the deadbolt sliding open was one of the best sounds I've ever heard. I was in the kitchen, making a pot of strong black coffee, when I heard their car pull up. I heard the car doors slam. I heard them stomping up the porch steps. I heard the sound of a key in the lock. Jiggle, jiggle, rattle, jiggle. It didn't turn. A pause. Then pounding. A fist. Liam's. "Dad, open the door. The key's not working. What did you do?" Then Eleanor's voice, sharp and panicked. "Marcus, what is this? You can't do this to us. This is our home. We live here." I walked to the front door. I stood in front of it. I didn't open it. "No, Eleanor," I said, my voice clear through the solid wood. "It's my home, bought with my money and your mother-in-law's sweat, and you tried to steal it." I heard a noise, a frantic scrabbling, and saw Liam's face pressed against the side window. His eyes were wide, desperate. "Dad, please, it's dark, it's cold. Where will we go? We have nowhere to go." I looked at the shadow of my 40-year-old son on the other side of the glass, a man-child finally facing a consequence he couldn't lie his way out of. "I don't know, Liam," I said, and I was being honest. "That's for you to figure out. It's time you stood on your own 2 feet, like I tried to teach you, like a man is supposed to." I reached over and I pulled the curtain closed. I stood there in the quiet of my living room. It was still a mess, filled with their boxes and wedding decorations, but it was my quiet, that feeling of autonomy. It's maybe the best feeling there is. We work our whole lives, not to get rich, but to be independent, to know that we can handle our own affairs. I wonder how many of you out there feel the same way. That quiet satisfaction you get from changing the oil on your own car, or fixing a leaky faucet yourself, or just knowing you don't have to ask anyone for help. You know your tools, you know your hands, and you can get the job done. What does that independence, that self-reliance, mean to you? Let me know what you think in the comments. The next morning, I woke up. The first thing I didn't clean up the party mess. That could wait. I went up to the attic. I opened my footlocker. I carried my things back downstairs. Back to my den. I went to the wall, the sterile white wall that Eleanor had painted. I got my old Craftsman hammer from the garage, the one with the worn wooden handle that fit my palm perfectly. I took a nail. I hammered it into the wall. Thwack, 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 one by one, carefully. I hung the shadow box with my medals. I hung the frame photo of my unit, my brothers. And last, I hung the folded flag from Sarah's memorial in the center, right where it belonged. My wall of honor was back. My hands, that little tremor was still there. It would probably always be, but they were still strong enough. They were strong enough to rebuild what was broken. The house was my home again. After the locksmith left, the house was quiet. Too quiet. It still had the faint, sickly sweet smell of that party, like stale champagne and failure. But it was my quiet. The first thing I did, not the next morning, but right then, that evening, I went to my old bedroom, the one on the first floor. It was still a mess. The wedding planner's clipboards and fabric swatches and binders were still piled on the dresser. I just started making a pile. I grabbed an empty trash bag from the kitchen. I didn't care where it went. I just cleared it. All of it. I dumped her things into 3 black bags and put them on the porch. The sheets on the bed, they weren't mine. They were some kind of silky 1,000-count nonsense that felt cold to the touch. They still smelled faintly of Eleanor's perfume. I ripped them off the bed. I bunched them up and threw them in the hall. I went to the linen closet. Way in the back, on the bottom shelf, I found what I was looking for. My own sheets. Old, soft flannel, worn thin in a few spots, but clean. They smelled like, well, like nothing. Just clean, honest cotton. I made the bed. My hands felt sure. I sat on the edge of the mattress for a long time, just feeling it, the give of it. It was my bed, the one I'd shared with Sarah. That night, when I lay down, my back still ached from the fall, but the mattress, it knew me. It settled around me. It was home. I didn't dream. I didn't toss and turn. I just slept. For 10 straight hours. It was the first deep, dreamless sleep I'd had in, God, maybe months. It was the sleep of a man who knows, deep down in his bones, that the locks are set and the fortress is secure. A few days passed. It was strange, just the silence, just me cleaning up the mess of their failed party. The phone rang on Wednesday, and I just about jumped out of my skin. I didn't know who'd be calling. It was her. Captain Russo. Ava. General, she said. Her voice was strong, professional. I hope I'm not bothering you. I just wanted to see if I could buy you lunch, my treat. We met at this little diner off the highway, the kind of place that's been there since the 50s. Red vinyl booths, a long formica counter, and those little spinning pie cases. They make a meatloaf platter that'll remind you of your mom's. She was already there, in a booth by the window. She was in her uniform. It always strikes you, seeing the uniform in a place like that. It looks out of place, but right at the same time, she looked young, but her eyes were old. We ordered coffee. The waitress called us both Onzurm. Ava couldn't quite look at me at first. She just stirred her coffee. Sir, I just wanted to say, I am so sorry for all of it, for my part in your family's situation. We, my parents and I, we had no idea what we were walking into. I put my coffee mug down. Captain, I said, and I waited till she looked at me. You have absolutely nothing to apologize for. You did the hardest thing a soldier or any person can do. You saw something wrong, and you chose the harder right instead of the easier wrong. That's not just loyalty, that's honor, the real thing. You did the right thing. Don't you ever for 1 second think otherwise. And then we just talked. The waitress came by and we ordered the meatloaf. And we just talked. For hours. She refilled our coffee 3 times. We talked about Kandahar, not the fighting, not really, but the dust, the feeling of it, the boredom that's 99% of it, and the sheer blinding terror that's the other 1%. We talked about what it's like to lead, the weight of it, and I found myself talking about Sarah, about how she kept the home fires burning, how she understood why I had to go, even when she hated it. And Ava, she listened. She understood. She got it. In a way, Liam, in a way he never could. It was, I don't know, like a weight I'd been carrying for years was finally being lifted. I realized sitting there that in a way, I'd lost my son that day at the wedding. But I was gaining a comrade, a real friend. Finally, she looked at her watch. Sir, my unit's being reassigned. We're going to be at the base just outside town for the next year. A training rotation. She hesitated. If you wouldn't mind, I'd like to stop by sometimes, check in, maybe bring some coffee. I had to clear my throat. I just nodded. I'd like that very much, Captain. Very much. When she left, I just sat there for a while, finishing my coffee. It felt like I'd found a daughter who spoke my language. About a week later, I was checking the mail. Just the usual. Bills, junk, and one envelope. A plain white business envelope. My name written on the front. Liam's handwriting. No return address. My first instinct, my gut, was to tear it up. To just throw it in the trash, unread. To protect that piece I'd just found. I stood there by the mailbox for a full minute, but I couldn't. He's my son. I went inside. I sat at the kitchen table. I opened it with my thumb. The letter was short. Just a few lines on a cheap piece of notepad paper. The kind you get at a motel. Dad, I'm sorry. I got lost. Eleanor's gone. She left the day after. I'm in a program. I'm trying. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. I read it. Maybe 5, 6 times. Forgiveness. That's a heavy word. A complicated word. Did I forgive him? For the beggar coat? For the lies? For trying to steal my home? For putting his hands on me? The anger, that white-hot rage from the wedding, it was gone. It had burned itself out. And underneath, where the anger was, there was just this cold, empty sadness. He's my blood, my boy. But he broke something. He broke a trust that I don't know if it can be fixed. I didn't know what to feel, so I just folded the letter. I opened the junk drawer in the kitchen. The one with the old batteries and the rubber bands and the spare keys to nothing. And I put it in there. Maybe one day I'll be ready to read it again. But not today. I couldn't just sit there. The quiet of the house was too much. I went out to the garage, my workshop. I hadn't been in there in months. It was dusty. A thin layer of dust covered everything. My old DeWalt miter saw, my drill press, my craftsman tools, all hanging on the pegboard, just asleep. It smelled like cold oil and old wood. I wiped the dust off the workbench. I plugged in the saw. The sound of it whirring to life, that high-pitched scree, it felt good. It felt real. I found a piece of scrap oak, a good solid piece. I decided I'd just build a birdhouse, nothing fancy, just something, to make something. The feel of the wood under my hands, that rough grain, the smell of the sawdust as the blade cut through it, that was real. That made sense. You take a piece of wood, you measure, you cut, you join, you make something new. It was healing. That's the only word for it. I stood in my garage for 4 hours, covered in sawdust, and I felt like myself again. Not a general, not a beggar, just Marcus. A man who can build things. I might have lost a part of my family, but I was finding myself again. And that was a start. Ava, she's a good soldier. She kept her word. Every Sunday morning, like clockwork, I'd hear her little Honda pull up. She'd come up the walk with 2 cups of coffee from the good local place downtown. One black, one with a little cream, she'd say, just in case. We'd just sit on the front porch in those old rocking chairs that Sarah and I bought 30 years ago. Sometimes we'd talk for an hour about her training, about the new army, about what was on the news. Sometimes we'd just sit in silence, watching the neighborhood wake up, listening to the birds. It was easy. It was comfortable. One Saturday, I was in the workshop, trying to fix a wobbly leg on an old end table. She came out, still in her running gear. "Need a hand, General?" I was about to say no, out of habit, but she just picked up the wood glue and a C-clamp. "My dad, he taught me," she said, seeing my look. "He's a big believer in doing things yourself, not paying someone for what your own 2 hands can fix." She was good at it, handy. We worked together. We fixed the table. It was nice. It wasn't about her taking care of me. I didn't need a nurse. I didn't need a babysitter. It was friendship. Simple, honest friendship. The best kind. One afternoon, she was in my den, the coffee cups on the side table. She was looking at the wall, my wall of honor. She was quiet for a long time, just reading the citations. "General," she said, "have you ever thought about writing these stories down? The stories behind the medals, the men you served with?" I just had to laugh. "Captain, I'm a soldier. I'm a carpenter. I'm not a writer. I wouldn't know where to start." She just smiled, very gently. She looked back at the wall. "Legacy isn't just about the things we leave behind, sir. It's not just the medal and the ribbons. It's about the lessons, the stories we pass on." Her words, they stuck with me. They rattled around in my head all evening. What we pass on. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went to my desk, the one in my newly reclaimed bedroom. I pulled out a fresh legal pad, a plain yellow legal pad, and a pen. I sat there for a long time. Then I just started writing, not for a book, not for anyone else, just for me, to get it down. I wrote about Kandahar. I wrote about the cold and how the dust gets into everything. I wrote about Mike Singh and a close call we had near Bagram. I wrote about Sarah, about her letters, how they felt in my hands, like a piece of home. And I wrote about the boys, the young soldiers, the ones who didn't get to come home, the ones who didn't get to become old men with shaky hands. And as I was writing, I realized Ava was right. This was the legacy, not the house, not the bank account, Those were the things Liam and Eleanor were willing to destroy our family for. But they weren't the real treasure. The real legacy was the truth, the lessons, the honor, the stories. That was the stuff that couldn't be stolen. Months went by. Summer turned into a crisp, cool fall. The leaves on the big oak in my front yard turned bright red. I'd gotten into a routine. Coffee with Ava, my workshop, my writing. It was quiet. It was a good life. Then one Sunday, early afternoon, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Ava was on rotation. I went to the door. I looked through the peephole. It was Liam. I opened the door. I almost didn't recognize him. He was thin, gaunt, but his eyes, they were clear. They weren't wild, like the gambler's eyes. They weren't dead, like at the wedding. They were just sober. He was wearing a clean but old work shirt. He had his hands jammed in his pockets. He was just standing there, on my porch, looking at his shoes. "Dad," he said. His voice was hoarse. "I finished my 90 days. I'm in a halfway house over on the east side. I got a job at the AutoZone, just stocking shelves. I'm trying." We just stood there. I didn't know what to say. The silence just stretched. He finally looked up, not at my face, but at the lawn. "Your grass is getting high," he said. He pointed to the shed. "Is the old John Deere still in there? I could cut it for you, if you want. For free, of course, just to do it." I looked at the lawn. It was getting long. I looked at him, really looked at him. I just nodded. "Yeah," I said. "Tools are where they always were." I didn't invite him in. Not yet. It was too soon. The wound was too deep. But I left the front door open, just the screen door closed. I went to the kitchen window and I watched him. He went to the shed. He got the mower. He checked the gas. He checked the oil. He started it up. And he mowed the lawn in straight, careful, overlapping lines. The way I taught him to when he was 12, maybe. Maybe there was hope. Forgiveness, it's not a light switch. It's a process. It's like rebuilding a wall. You do it one brick at a time. So, my story, it's got a strange kind of ending. It's not one of those big Hollywood victories. There's no parade. Eleanor, she's gone, vanished. As far as I know, she left the state, probably looking for her next mark. Liam, he's in the wilderness. He's trying to find his way back. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. That's his story to write. And me, I'm here. I'm in my house. My wall is up. My workshop is busy. And I've got a new friend. A friend I love like a daughter. I learned something through all this. I learned that honor, it's not just a word. It's not a medal they pin on your chest. It's a thing you live every day in the choices you make when no one's looking. And legacy, it's not about the money in your bank account or the house you own. It's about the truth you lived, the stories you're willing to tell. They called me a beggar. They called me old and useless and confused. But standing here in my home, I realize I've never been richer because I know exactly who I am. Thank you. Thank you, folks, for listening to my story. It meant a lot. You all stay safe and stay honorable.